Alrighty folks, want to welcome you back to the next video of this little collection I'll be doing. This one I wanted to talk about SATA drives. And the difference is kind of between a SATA drive and an nvme drive. They're completely different drives. They may be an M.2 port, card, design, layout, whatever you want to call it, compatible. I have one right here that came with my laptop. Most people might go, oh, that's just an NVMe. This is not an NVMe drive. This is an M.2 port drive. I want to break that down. There's a huge difference. Especially with Windows 11, with the higher recommendations, the higher minimum standards, and all of that are out there nowadays. This is going to probably be a factor that comes into play. This is really going to be a buyer beware for you. Because you're going to go out and buy a new computer because your old one is no longer supported by Windows 10. October of 2025 is when the support really stops. That's when you really kind of need to go buy a new one because you're not going to get the latest drivers. You're not going to get a lot of latest stuff. You're going to run out and get one. Odds are it's going to have, hopefully, it won't have this thing in it. These things are pretty much obsolete for OS. You can still use them. They're going to be really, really slow. You don't want to do that. If you go out and buy a new computer, you want to get the newer solid state drives. Most likely, a lot of places have gone to these. Here's your solid state drive. Here's your SATA drive. Yes, I said SATA drive. This is a SATA drive. It should say on there. But this is a SATA drive. This is not an NVMe drive. I wanted to break that down and explain that more so that if you go out and buy a computer and you think you're getting something else, it might tell you it comes with an NVMe drive, 500 gig. Okay, but when you look at benchmark speeds and stuff of the drives and what kind of drive it actually is, most manufacturers, to get away cheap, are using the SATA drives. They're not using the NVMe drives because they're buying them in such a huge bulk. They're getting them for a lot less. That's what they're doing. To me, it's kind of a dishonest feature to me that they do that, because they market it a certain way, but that's not really what you think you're going to get. So I wanted to cover that. A lot of manufacturers are putting in SATA hard drives. They're using some weird off-brands and stuff to get them cheaper to save money. They're not using the good quality brand. So I wanted to touch base on that. That's the SATA drive. NVMe drive is a lot faster, a lot better performance, and a lot of other things. And there's different versions out as of time of filming. This current version that most computers are using is the version 3. There is a version 4 out that is a high end that would be for gaming and all those type of things, that I don't know too many pre-made computers that are probably running version 4. There's probably not a whole lot out there that are actually going to tell you if they're running 3 or 4. If you can look at the benchmarks and look at the speeds and those type of things, you will see a huge difference between them. Catch 22. Do you actually need that higher speed of performance? Go out and pay $8,000 for a computer because you have the top of the end memory, nvme, processor, video card. Video card, you might be up to $10,000 for a good computer, top of the line. So there's a overkill to it all right now that really, I don't remember in the technology field ever saying you can overkill your computer. The new processors and how many cores and all of these things that are out there. Core count is important due to your video card. Core speed, all of those are due to your video card. If you buy a high-end video card, you need a high-end processor and high-end memory. If you're not gaming at 4K resolution, to me, I do gaming, but I don't see a point in having gaming at 4K resolution. They're talking about next step is like 8K resolution gaming. I'm fine with high definition. I'm gaming. I'm just on there playing, having fun. But if you get into a factor where you're really competitional based and all of that type of stuff, everybody wants the higher graphics, everybody wants the higher speed. I'm on there just having fun. I don't even know if I need high definition. I'm on there having fun, doing my little thing, running around, doing whatever I want. Basically, beating the high gamers and just to get them mad and stuff. But I'm not out spending that kind of money. I'm just out having fun. I'm on playing games and people are getting mad and cussing and swearing and I paid all this money for this system and I can't even do that. Like, really? You can't even have fun anymore. It's all about spending so much on these units. So for home business or home users, I don't know how much this will really make a factor for you. I've mentioned in my other videos that I went from this SATA drive to an nvme, same computer, everything else, and I did see a performance increase. I did see a difference. I didn't change memory, didn't change CPUs, didn't change graphics. It was a laptop. Mirrored over the data, wasn't a clean install. It was the install that I had on this drive, the same software, everything, same drivers, everything. Saw a huge performance difference. So I wanted to touch base on that. Because really, as of today, this is probably where all the technology is going to be current and moving on. Unless there's something greater that comes out. So, as for Windows 11 and all of that, when you go out and everybody buys new systems because they have these ancient legacy systems that are running things like this, and you buy a newer CPU with it, you buy all the new memory with it, you know, knowing their speeds of your memory, knowing your CPU speeds and all these other factors, this is one of the other major factors that comes into play. A lot of places I hear them talk to people when they buy computers, oh, it's an M.2. Okay, but what kind of M.2? Other factor I brought up on my video about the M.2, let me turn that over, show it again. On here you see the little round rings. The end one you can see the screw. That's the screw that holds the board in. There are 4 different sizes of these. At least. This board, this little shell that I have to make this an external drive will support 4 of them. So that's another thing you really kind of want to watch out for. because now they have these little small factor computers that are like yay big. They may not run the full size card. So if you decide to upgrade that in the future, that's something kind of a buyer's beware also. Because then you have to find the card that's the right size to fit in there. Some computers, some motherboards don't support smaller ones. A couple of them I worked with, it's only the full size card or board. So in a lot of my videos, I've already covered a lot of these subjects. Number one, if you're looking at upgrading, open your system up and look at it to see what your system can actually support and take before you go buy something. Because last thing you want to do is go out to the store and, oh, look, they have an M.2 card. Oh, okay, I'll take that because it's $30 or it's $50. And you go home and it's a half card, 3/4 card, or quarter card that your computer does not support. Because you thought, well, it's an M.2. Well, then you have other variables. SATA, nvme. Covered that in the socket, covered that in a couple other videos. They are different. It's the same socket, but there's a pin in there that's in different places. If you have a computer that has an M.2 slot, this slot here, that only supports SATA, you cannot put an NVMe drive in it. There are other ones out there that will not support a SATA drive, that will only take the NVMe drive. This will not fit in there. This model, this port, will accept both SATA and NVMe. So I can put either one in here. So that's one of the main factors. Then I showed you the backside with the different holes, the different sizes. So depending on where technology goes, these might actually even end up smaller in the future. They might end up as big as this. Because you need 8 terabytes. Or you need 4 terabytes. To me, these are numbers that are just crazy to me. Because I remember getting a 30 gig, 80 gig hard drive in the old days when I started. Those were huge. Now I'm talking, for something like this, recommending at least a 500 gig. These are huge numbers. Then if you're into gaming, you're looking at like a 500 gig for your OS and your basics, and you're looking at a terabyte to 4 terabyte for your gaming storage. The games have gotten so big, so much data. They went from floppy drives to CD-ROMs to DVD to Blu-ray, and then most of these new ones are like direct download because they're just so large. And then there's patches and updates and all kinds of other stuff that comes in afterwards. They're just huge. This data that it's mind-blowing to me to know the small drives, and I still have a bunch of them back there in the storage that I'll probably bring out here in a future video and show these drives. They were little tiny, they were the same size, but no storage. It's crazy the numbers that we are talking about today for a computer compared to what it was 15, 20, 30 years ago. For me to be recommending a 500 gigabyte drive is your bottom line. Most manufacturers, the smallest drives I think they have right now is either 128 or 256. That is like way above anything that we used to run in the old days. One of the other recommendations they have is not to fill the entire drive. Fill only half of it. Because if you fill more than half of it, you're going to hurt your performance of that drive. You're going to hurt the lifespan of that drive. This drive does a lot of things. It moves data around and into different modulars and stuff to increase the speed. So that's one of the factors also why you need to buy a larger drive nowadays for performance and for lifespan of that drive. So that's one of the main factors I wanted to bring up. That's one of the things with the SATA card that is really not different than the NVMe, but I'll be doing another video on that to touch base more on that. Because I really wanted to separate the two, because a lot of times I find people run it all together and they don't give you the true information between the SATA drive and the NVMe drive. They kind of talk about just put the drive in and it's a M.2 drive and blah, 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 blah. And, oh, this drive is better than that drive. That's it. But there are differences. This is basically the same technology you have in the SATA drive. You attach to your motherboard with the SATA connector and a power line. Brought up again, didn't really touch base on this in my power supply video, that now putting stuff in the enclosure USB wise, you're pulling power from the USB, you're putting this on the motherboard, drawing power from the motherboard adapter. So you want to make sure you have good modular cables, good power supply, or a power supply where it's all attached that can support the power to that board. Mentioned in, I think, the other video, the add-on cards, where you can add in a bunch of these cards. They have all kinds of weird options out there that you can do with these things now. You can do RAID on them. You can do all kinds of stuff on these cards that go into your slots that either draw power from a separate power cable or off the board. So this is really things that you want to do your homework on and you want to realize. And I wanted to touch base on that because now, if you're thinking about doing a RAID or some other situation like that, because you have critical information on there, because you're in a business environment where you want to make sure you have redundancy and backups, and you're looking at, oh, I can do an NVMe. Which NVMe are you doing? SATA or NVMe? They can be interchangeable. Depending on what parts you buy, they could be interchangeable. Depends on, now, you're going to have to buy 8 of these things. Go out and get this one for $80. Go out and get the other one for $150 each. Times 8. You might be okay with the SATA speeds. Because again, you're doing RAID, you're striping, you're mirroring, you're doing whatever you need to do for backup purposes. This is the difference I'm talking about now for backup purposes. You don't need to go out and buy an NVMe version 4 at, incredible reads and write speeds for that. So there's the split between the two. Even though the hardware might be able to support both, or you might have to choose between that card or this card, and the price differences might be astronomical. But it also varies down to, do you really need that speed? Do you really need all of that? So that's one of the subjects I wanted to bring up, because this is what's out now, And they're still developing and expanding this and getting different things to work because of the sizes of the drives. They were limited. So some of these cards actually came out that were really kind of cool because you can put 8, 10, 12 of these things on there and stripe them so that it shows a huge drive that you're running some really gnarly speeds out of. But for my use and most home people's uses, I can't imagine you actually needing that. This is where I'm getting into where you can actually overkill the system. You can go way too far. If you got the money and you want to have fun, you want to play, you want to test these things out, you want it because you want it, go for it. But I don't want someone to go out and buy this stuff and get mad because they're like, oh man, I got ripped off and I not getting the speeds. And then you look and you go, well, I got SATA drives instead of NVMe. Wait a minute, what's going on here? You find out after the fact there's a difference. Because you're expecting a certain performance you're not getting because you got a different piece of hardware that look pretty much identical. That you could actually buy SATA drives, put it in the same board and same things that support NVMe, and think you have NVMe when you don't, you have SATA. So that is kind of the buyer beware. That's kind of where things are at. Depending on what happens here in the future, if the SATA drives actually stick around or end up being the low cost, low budget way to go, maybe the SATA port goes away and you end up with SATA drives and NVMe drives. Who knows? But maybe they end up coming with a color code, something just really different, make them different from each other so there is no confusion on what this is and what that is. Because right now, I think there's a lot of confusion on that. People ask me, oh, what can I do to increase my computer? Well, you can put in SATA drive. If you have an M.2, check to see if it supports the SATA or NVMe. Well, you just told me about the SATA drive. No, the SATA drive and the SATA NVMe are different when it comes to the M.2 port, and the SATA cable is different. SATA drive, SATA cable drive is different than the M.2 SATA. So I wanted to really touch on that too, because you have the SATA drive with the SATA cable that goes on the motherboard to this port. It's a different port than the M.2 SATA drive. So I think I've covered SATA. I'll wrap this one up. I've gone on really long. Next video will be covering a lot of NVMe. NVMe is a different breed, so I'll cover that one next. Thank you. Make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the bell, leave your comments, forward this out to everybody. Let everybody know these videos are there, educating. Thank you.